This sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, yeah, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I'm pissed off at you.
Me, specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. I am your co-host, Michael Nash, and with me here is...
I am the younger Nash in this room, Ethan Nash. Hey, everybody.
Thanks for being with us, father and son, co-consultants, partners in Nash Consulting Incorporated. And we are here to, this is very exciting, we are beginning today Season 2.
Season 2.
In just a bit, we're going to get into it. I'll tell you what we're about to do, though. We are going to dig into the top 15 management skills. And we totally know that we've done this before. We have introduced you to the top 15 management skills based on research, but we're going to get a little deeper today.
We are. We're going to take a little bit of a different twist, a little bit of a different flavor to it, if you will. We're going to kind of get a little bit more in depth with all 15 of these management skills and do some skill building, some knowledge base building along the way. So it's going to be a pretty robust start to Season 2. And hey, we're excited to be back with you all. We know we took a bit of a break. You probably haven't seen a new episode for a couple months, and we are energized. We're ready to be back. Our goal here is to provide valuable information to help you lead well, help you manage well, help you live well, in a sense.
I love that. No, seriously, manage well, lead well, and live well. That needs to be like our, what do you call that? Subtitle, motto thing? I like that.
Subtitle, motto thing. I think that you would probably agree with this as well, that there's a whole lot of parallels between learning great management skills, right, and adaptive skills, and skills that will benefit you immensely in the workplace, and the crossover that has with parenting, with being a partner, being a husband, being a wife, being a friend, right? And Absolutely. So I do think we can cover a lot of skills in a lot of different domains.
I totally agree. So what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to do a series, cover the 15 management skills and a couple bonus skills on top of that, and we are really excited about that. But before we get going, I actually wanted to ask you, Ethan, if you would just catch us up. We have had... I forget now. How many episodes have we had?
Oh, boy. We have done roughly 36 episodes, and that's not including a few small bonus episodes.
Awesome.
So, yeah, we're close to 40 episodes, dozens of hours worth of conversation. Just a little recap of where we've been so far in Season 1 before we jump into the meat and potatoes of Season 2. Hey, we started off this entire podcast adventure talking about morale. Morale is a huge concept that just, as a leader, as a manager, as a team contributor in a workplace, you have to have this on your radar. So we actually spend the first 2 episodes talking about morale, as well as the Peter Principle.
People tend to get promoted till they reach their level of incompetence.
Right, and talking about how do we counteract the Peter Principle? What is that all about? So we move on and we discuss this concept of the power differential, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in this kickoff to Season 2. And then in episode 4 and 5, we talk about adaptive skills, and these are the skills that we brought with us from childhood, and they make or break our success in nearly every aspect of our life.
Like listening so the other person feels heard, receiving feedback so you're not punishing the other person with defensiveness, handling your own stress so it's not leaking out on everyone around you.
Practicing empathy, getting in someone else's shoes, being in someone else's movie. What is it like to be in their movie, right? Curiosity, how approaching a conversation with curiosity as opposed to categorizing and judging. So these skills, they're always in play. Then we get into a whole bunch of stuff about feedback. Episode 6 is about receiving feedback non-defensively. Episode 7, episode 8, and episode 10, all about giving feedback. And it's 3 episodes because it really is an art, right? How do we give feedback in a way that changes behavior, right? That communicates clearly and keeps you connected relationally to that person. Because you have to stay connected relationally if you actually want to have a healthy workplace where feedback works.
I'm not supposed to have favorites maybe, but I do recall those were, I think, my favorite episodes.
Episode 9, just a little bit from going from peer to boss, how to make that transition. Episode 11 and 12, top 15 management skills. We're going to get into them more here, as we said. We talked about one-on-one meetings. Episode 13, how to have effective one-on-one meetings. We did a whole behavioral style series. It was a fun one. We talk about how behavioral styles show up, what we're talking about with behavior styles, and then we spent an episode on each of the 4 behavior styles. That is episodes number 15, 16, 17, 18, and episode 19.
Okay, so
and episode 20. That was a 6-part series on
series.
behavior styles. Episode 21, how to run meetings that don't suck your soul, right? How to have effective meetings. And then we had another follow-up part from that in episode 22 on kind of just tools and tactics for meeting facilitation. We did a whole episode on remote meetings for all of us that have just dealt with COVID-19. And episode 24 was a great episode. We brought in our colleague, Dr. Anna Gibson. We talked with her about what does it mean to manage remotely and still being able to show caring and respect when you're not physically able to be there with people. We did episode 26, skipping a few episodes here, of course. Episode 26, how to combat workplace negativity, right, or what we call triangulation. Hey, if I have a problem with person B or thing B or group B, how do I handle that? Episode 27 was on SCARF, an acronym, and the social neuroscience of leadership, more about how the brain shows up in collaborative settings. We talked about the art of decision-making in episode 28, right? There's 6 styles that we talk about. We had episode 29 on systems thinking. Episode 30, a bit on change, right? And what it means to manage change and why it's so hard. In 32, we brought on our other colleague, Hannah Butler, talking about kind of the team dynamics. Episode 33 was a fun one. This was a bit on mindfulness.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We called this one Learning to Manage Your Mind. This is what I would consider another adaptive skill, right? The ability to show up mindfully. Episode 34 was a unique, fun podcast. We brought on Errol Dubler, who has leadership consulting practice of his own. He comes from a totally different world than what you and I come from. He spent time as a Navy SEAL in the FBI as a SWAT team member, so he had some unique perspectives, coming from his background. Episode 35, how to do consensus decision making, and the last episode that we did, developing a growth mindset through self-compassion.
That was your solo adventure.
I did a solo one. I've been studying a lot on self-compassion, researching it, practicing it, and I just felt like I needed the riff for 30 minutes on another adaptive skill. And in fact, I consider self-compassion to be, if we had the rank order adaptive skills, which might be dangerous, I think that is one of the most important ones.
In fact, folks, as we're finishing up this little review, if you're joining us for the first time in season 2, which is fantastic, welcome. And if you decided you really only had time to listen to one, I would actually suggest that one. As we personally, individually, have been working on self-compassion and reading some great books about it, I actually believe that a manager needs to understand and practice that skill if they're going to be effective in any other part of their life, because it's the lack of self-compassion that gets in our way and makes it really hard for us to grow and learn the other skills.
Well, thank you. And actually, I was wrong. Sorry. The very last episode we did was your leadership team brand gaining influence in the right way. We brought on another consultant from the Atlanta area. His name is Scott Waldron. And he is focused on helping leadership teams create a brand for themselves, right? How do we want this leadership team to be known for? How do we want us to show up? And so that was a pretty fun episode.
Listening to that list, I remember when this was just an idea, let's do a podcast, and we have quite a body of work there, and it's exciting to hear that. I'm thrilled that we've been able to put all this out there to all of you. I hope it's been helpful, and we are looking forward to another season.
All right, this is the last thing as a preamble before we get into what we're actually doing over these next several episodes. If you have found value in this podcast, as you know, we don't do ads. We rely on basically word of mouth and rankings for people to find this show. We would love it for you to share this with people that could get something out of this. And if you could leave us a review or a ranking on whatever platform you listen to, that's actually really helpful. That helps other people find the show. So those are my asks. Just so you know, we also have a newsletter. Comes out once a month. It's more of a publication where we're kind of writing articles on a lot of what we talk about here in the podcast. If you would like to get on that newsletter, text the word leading to the number 66866.
Unless you're in Europe. We just found out, because I am training a group of Europeans, when they text the word leading, LEADING, to the number 66866, they get an over 18 psychic site.
Right.
But that's not us.
So if you are out of the United States, you probably should just go to our website, nashconsulting.com. You'll find an area to sign up for the newsletter.
Whew.
All right. What are we doing here?
Hey, here we are. Welcome, everybody. Season 2. The big, long preamble. I hope that was somewhat helpful, but we're gonna get into this. We actually are going to talk about, again, the top 15 management skills. And these skills, in some ways, form a bit of a foundation for our 5-day Managing with Mind and Heart training. I will tell you they're based on a number of research projects and studies, specifically a Gallup study that Ethan will be referring to as we go through this. But here's the bottom line, folks. There really are, let me start over. We want to combat the Peter principle, right? You get promoted to management, good luck, and we're not going to give you any skills. Just go for it. Not understanding, of course, that going into management is a really big job, and it's really complex, and it's really, really important. You would never say to the nurse, hey, welcome, next week you're the surgeon, right? You would never say to the accountant, you're now going to be the manager, except that's what we do all the time. So we're here to talk about 15 vital skills that managers need to have.
Yes, we are. As we go through these skills, we're going to take a lot of side trips. This is going to be a little bit less focused as maybe episode 1 was, 15 management skills, just because we're going to go all over the place, but they really are all connected to these top 15 management skills.
We're going to start with top 15 management skills number 1. And let me side note first before I say it, these really aren't in any kind of rank order as far as importance, except for the first one. Ethan, take it away.
The first one is show caring and respect.
This is not at first blush, it might seem like kind of a touchy-feely thing, but hey, bottom line, folks, when I go to work and I have a boss, right, here's this person who has some control or some power over me, some authority, right? If I don't believe that they care about me as a person, it's scary. It really is. And whether it's, unconscious or not, I'm going to be afraid. And I might not even know I'm afraid, but what's going to happen is I'm going to be cautious. I'm going to be reserved. I'm going to be careful with what I say. Bottom line is, if I'm not sharing caring and respect as a manager, I'm not creating an environment that's based on psychological safety.
Psychological safety was researched by Amy Edmondson from Harvard University. And they've done a ton of research on psychological safety, and the reality is basically studies show that psychological safety allows for risk-taking, allows for the ability for people to speak their mind, for creativity, for sticking your neck out without the fear of it getting cut off, right? And so if you're not showing care and respect as a leader, as a manager of a group, as a manager of the team, there's not going to be psychological safety. And all those cool things that you want, right, including morale, including engagement, are not going to be there without psychological safety.
That's a perfect summary right there. When we don't feel safe in the workplace, right, it's going to limit my ability to bring my best self. It's going to limit my ability to create a culture of feedback. We all lose, basically. And the number one way that we create psychological safety as managers is by, in a sense, convincing our people that we care about them and we respect them. Now, how do we do that, Ethan? Let's talk about that. I mean, it's not enough to say, hey, go do that. What does that look like?
There's so many ways to show care and respect. And here's some ways. And this is why it's not just a touchy-feely thing. Showing care and respect is also understanding your people, your employees, and understanding that it's your job to bring the very best out of them. To me, that's showing care and respect. And to me, that also means maybe giving hard feedback at times. But that also means giving positive feedback when you see it. And it could mean holding people accountable for what you asked them to do or what they said they were going to do. To me, that's also showing care and respect. But it's also taking them and saying, hey, what do you need? What kind of resources can I provide you to help you to be successful? It spans a whole lot of topics and skills to show care and respect.
I would agree. In fact, in class, we usually ask people to stop and brainstorm on this, and I'd like to do that for a few minutes here. First of all, let me just, and I don't mean this to be redundant, but let's get it on our radar as managers that our job as managers isn't just to air traffic control the work, right? Or just to get our tasks done. We really have to remember that the morale of our employees is our job, right? For the most part, not completely, but for the most part. And the number one way we are going to increase morale and psychological safety is our people feeling cared about. So let's make sure that's on our radar as managers, right? And by the way, this doesn't have to do with who you like. This isn't the same thing as being friends, right? Those are whole different things, right? So how about coming to work, and this sounds so obvious, right? But not everyone does this. How about coming to work and just being nice and friendly and checking in and how are you and how was your weekend? And, what if you don't just cut to the chase, every time you're having a conversation, but practice being relational?
Right, having what people would call quote-unquote small talk. Really all that small talk is, and there's research behind this too, it's just meaning you're not just focused on the task, right? You're not just focused on the job at hand, but you actually are focused on that person too. And we all have a need to be cared about. Another way you can show caring and respect is encouraging your employees' development in whatever way that is. I know me in this job and in previous jobs when I've had people come up to me, bosses, managers, whoever, and say, hey, I want to help you develop, right? You know what that tells me? It says they're watching, right? And they believe in me.
And they're more concerned. I mean, they're concerned about you, not just what you can do for them.
Right. How can I help you?
Right.
That is the difference there. Right? There's ways to frame a conversation of, how can I make it so you can best help this company compared to how can I make it so I can best help you?
Absolutely. Another one would be, making sure that you're not accidentally creating a culture of punishment, right? That you're able to look at missed goals or missed deadlines or maybe even just pure failures, right? Look at those as opportunities for development, as growth opportunities, mentoring, coming alongside the employee, as opposed to the punishment or the shaming or, all that kind of garbage that can just, it can just create basically not only it can scar the employee in a sense, but it can really damage that relationship and damage the trust. Ethan, let me approach it this way. I guess technically I'm your boss, right?
Technically.
I'm parent, son, and boss and partner in the business. But let me ask you this. As my employee, what do you need from me for you to feel respected? What would I need to do as your boss for you to feel that I respect you?
Honestly, it's back to one of the things I already mentioned. Somebody that has an eye on my development, that has an eye on my well-being, somebody that's also there to help, right? That recognizes when I have my head below water and is willing to say, can I help you here? Or, hey, can I help coordinate other people to help this, right? Someone that's actually paying attention to where I might be at on, what we call kind of a stress curve, right? Am I so far over the stress curve that now my, there's anxiety and there's, my performance has actually decreased? Or am I right where I need to be. So someone that's paying attention to my well-being in a sense in relation to everything that I have to do.
It's really well put. And listeners, I just catch that whole idea of the employee being on your radar, right? Like you're actually paying attention. One for me, Ethan, would be, I love it when people ask my opinion. I think that's a caring, that's a little more on the respect side of caring and respect. But when somebody honors my experience or my wisdom or just the fact that I'm a human being with opinions, right? And they not just superficially ask and then kind of ignore me, but they seem to actually value what I have to say.
Yeah, and I think that's true for each and every person, right? No matter what your job is, for someone to value your opinion, right? And I think even especially so for any creative type teams, any creative type jobs, I think that's even more important that there's a leader that knows they're working with a bunch of creatives to really seek out their opinion.
Mm-hmm. So as a boss, what would you do differently, right, in staff meetings? If you are running staff meetings, what ideas do you have for me, right? Or I need to make this decision. Before I make this decision, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? And I can be saying that to my team or to an individual.
Yeah, and by the way, as a little teaser, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, this is great, but when do I do all these things? When do I have these conversations? How do I collect this information from my employee, this data, if you want to call it, from my employee, so I can actually do, tailor my management style to show them the care and the respect that they need? And I think that we both agree that happens a lot in regularly scheduled one-on-one meetings, which we're going to get to at the end of this series that we're doing. So boom, little teaser for there. Hey, the last thing I wanted to say on this one, you mentioned the Gallup survey, right? And so a lot of, a good portion of these top 15 management skills were, adapted from this Gallup survey that basically they measured multiple business outcomes across a whole bunch of industries, right? And they identified these 12 questions, and the teams that answered more positively to these questions were linked to greater business outcomes, to
higher performance.
And they identified, 6 of those questions that were actually most important for multiple business outcomes. And they're also all immediately actionable. And 2 of those are, does your supervisor or someone at work seem to care about you as a person? Those employees and those teams that answered positively for that one, their team overall was a higher performing team. Another question was, is there someone at work that encourages your development? Sound familiar? Right. Those teams that employees said, yes, there's someone at work that does this, especially if they're your manager, right? And they have
Absolutely.
that type of power differential over you, which we'll get into. That's powerful, yo.
Yeah, yo. No, that's great. I remember having a guy in class come up to me after we'd gone over the 15 management skills, and he said, hey, I'm doing really good on all of these. I just don't have the first one. and I just, I don't remember what I said to him, but what I was thinking was, hey, dude, it's not going to work. You can actually maybe not be fantastic in every one of these 15 things, and you can still do pretty well. Meaning you can maybe miss a couple of these, but you can't miss this one. I mean, if your people don't believe you actually care about them, there's no trust and respect. There's no psychological safety.
And I get we're spending a lot of time on this one. That's because, like we said, if there was one most important one out of all of these, it's this one. We're talking about psychological safety from the beginning, right? Showing care and respect will help create the psychological safety. There's other things that you have to do besides showing care and respect to optimize psychological safety, right? What's interesting is you take a group of kindergartners and you have them perform what they call this kind of marshmallow stick challenge, right? Where they build these structures using marshmallows and sticks, right? And they have a certain amount of time, and they put them on teams. So teams of kindergartners. Teams of kindergartners consistently outperform MBA students, teams of lawyers, right? These people that you would think, oh, of course they're going to beat kindergartners. Well, so what's what is the difference there? Why are they beating them? Well, the reality is, when you're a kindergartner, you don't have the same type of social pressures that you feel kind of getting older and growing up, right? When the kindergartners do this, they huddle together closely. There's quick bursts of communication, right? They're all willing to contribute, right? They're all willing to give quick feedback. Oh, hey, no, do this instead. Do this instead. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because these are the same types of behaviors that they observe in some of the top performing teams. And what they relate this to is psychological safety. It's the top performing teams that are able to kind of put down their egos right? And know that they're safe in this environment, know that people care about them in this environment, and now they can just get to work, right? And they can take risks with each other, and they perform well.
That's a great example, dude. That really is. And again, that psychological safety comes from many sources, but primary is, do I feel safe with my boss, which has to do with, does he or she care about me, right? Does he or she respect me? Good.
If you want some more reading on that, I would check out the book The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Talks a lot about psychological safety, especially from the leader's standpoint.
And I hate to keep saying one more thing, but let me just side note.
One more thing.
Side note to the side note to the side note. You might just also want to think in terms of, what to avoid. Just, you might want to have a separate category in your brain, right? Like, interrupting people, shaming, barging into meetings and, late and saying, catch me up. Not giving people assignments without even inquiring what else is on their plate. I just keep in mind, it's not just the things we do, it's also those things we want to avoid doing. So
right. So that's caring and respect. We spent a lot of time there. I think it was well worth it. That was one of 15 of the top 15 management skills.
Let's get into number 2. Before I mention it, I will say that a lot of these other 14 management skills could be considered subsets of number 1. I mean, a lot of these are ways to show caring and respect, but we are isolating them as separate items. So number 2 is advocate for your employees, both as individuals and as a team.
And that seems pretty intuitive when you look at it on its face. However, where I struggle with sometimes is understanding, what exactly does it mean to advocate for your employees? So I'm curious, what are some examples of advocating for your employee?
I think the main concept around advocating for our people is we have to make sure that our people have a clear path to success, that they clearly can achieve what we want them to achieve, what they want to achieve. So we're advocating, which means we are actively both providing what they need for success and getting things out of the way that are causing them to not be successful. So, for example, I'm going to be checking in with you and see, do you have the equipment? Do you have the training? Do you have the resources? Do you have the cooperation? Do I need to sponsor other parts of the organization to help support what you're doing? At the same time, are there things in the way? Is there gaps that you're experiencing? Is there lack of cooperation maybe that you're experiencing? Are there gaps in terms of et cetera, resources? So again, my job as a manager is to know what's going on for you in terms of your ability to be successful, and then intervene when appropriate.
I really like what you said. I think a lot of people can get caught in the mindset of, how else can I provide support? How else can I advocate you? How can I do this? How can I add things, right? But what's often the case is there's a whole bunch of barriers that if you remove those, that might be the biggest bang for your buck as far as showing up as advocating for your employees, removing barriers along the way.
Yep, those barriers could be bureaucracies that are overly burdensome. They could be communication that's not happening. It could be me, like your boss, like I myself could be a barrier by being unclear or changing my mind. And of course, how are we going to find out what they are? Go ask your people. And Ethan mentioned one-on-ones. We'll get to those later. But this is a question that actually I find in coaching managers. About a year ago, I asked this guy, when was the last time you asked that question? He said, I don't think I've ever asked that question.
What question specific?
What is in the way and what do you need for you to be able to be successful? And I just think that's such a good, humble, open, supportive question.
Yeah, you can't advocate for your employees unless you know what you need to advocate for. The idea is so many people, and again, myself included, I can sometimes think, I know how I can advocate for these employees, and I'm actually not doing the things that they really need. Mm-hmm. Real quickly, I want to touch on something that we talked about last season, but here's a tricky situation. How can you advocate for your employees and advocate for your company at the same time when those things can be at odds? Mm-hmm. Like when the employee needs you to advocate for them based on something the organization is doing, but then your hands get tied in cases.
Yeah. Middle management. That's the bane of middle management, right? So here I am, hey, Ethan, you just told me that you needed some training or some equipment or even some time off for some personal issue or whatever it is, and I don't have the power to grant that, let's say, in this organization. So I go upstairs and I ask the executive, and, I might not get what I wanted, right? I might not get a yes. And so now I have to come back and I have to somehow find a way to walk this difficult middle ground where I'm going to continue to demonstrate to you that I'm advocating for you, that I care, right? But I also have to, like you said, in some ways advocate for my company, which means I can't throw them under the bus. I can't. So, I can't come back to you, Ethan, and say, those jerks, they're idiots. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, It might feel good to say that, and it might even make you feel good to hear that in a way, because we're now, I'm playing good cop, bad cop, though, right?
You're now gossiping and triangulating about the company, which is going to have some whole other effects down the road.
It actually creates a morale issue that I'm not even aware of in the moment. Even though we might be colluding together on this sort of negative conversation, I am not helping you have high morale at this point.
Yeah, the morale in that exact moment, you might get a quick spike because you're connecting, right? There actually is a psychological component to connecting on some negativity, right? And
misery loves company.
Misery loves company, but that's going to fade. And it's going to become kind of this vibe throughout your relationship with that person, and it's going to spread.
And it impacts their respect of you, ultimately.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to come back and still maintain my connection with the employee. For example, I might say, hey, I'm working on this. The answer was no. Here's the why, if I can give it to the person, right? Here's the why. What can we do to mitigate this for now? Find a way to stay connected, and don't say negative things about the company or about your boss. It's that fine line that's pretty important that we find.
All right, let's do like an example or like a role play. I come to you and I say, gosh, I don't feel like I get enough time off. You give me 2 weeks in a year. I work really hard. I think I should be able to have a whole month of time off in a year. And I'm telling you this as my manager. I'm talking with you. And you don't know yet if you can get that for your employee. How do you respond? And then what kind of steps do you take from there, assuming that you go back and ask your boss or the organization, hey, can I do this for my employees? And they say, no, we can't do that.
The first thing I think of, and we're going to maybe go down a little bit of a rabbit trail here, but by the way, folks, we didn't talk about this ahead of time, so this one's actually a hard one. It really is.
Yeah.
The first thing I think of is that in a relatively healthy company, I should probably know the answer to that. And there's a nuance here, right? Because if I take something like that I actually know the answer to, like I fully know the answer because I have 20 employees and I just couldn't do that, and I say, oh, I'm going to go find out, in a way, I'm kind of shirking my own responsibility here to, to actually make the decision.
Because you know the answer, but you don't want to tell them right there.
And I can blame someone else later, right? Yeah. If the answer is no, which I know the answer is going to be no, but I can say, well, Ethan, I tried, and the jerks.
So you got to be transparent right there and be like, I know the answer.
And let's look at the why, and let's look at the,
right.
and et cetera.
And at the same time, not every organization is there yet. There may be a manager you don't know, you're new, and you're like, that seems like a reasonable request. I want to advocate for them. I'm going to go find out. And not only am I going to find out, I'm going to go to bat for this person and say they our employees do work hard.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And so let's take that scenario. And I might not just be new. It might be a little bit more of either a smaller or a more flexible organization where it is open. And for some reason, I don't have the authority. So that would be a very unique combination. It's open, flexible, but I can't do it myself. And is your question, what do I do when I don't get a yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me give that a shot. Hey, Ethan, I spent some time with George, and we talked about your situation and your request and what was going on. I've got to let you know, I hate to say this, but the answer was no. And I'm going to tell you what's going on. We talked about some equity issues around other employees. We talked about some the financial component. At the same time, we also talked about maybe some mitigating factors. Possibly we could do a little bit more of a flex schedule. There might be the ability for you to kind of move your hours around a little bit so that you could maybe sometimes have 3-day weekends if you were to do, maybe work 10-hour days. We talked even about, I know it's not the best response, but hey, you could take some unpaid time off, meaning you might not be aware that is a possibility. So bottom line is, I'm going to come back and I'm not going to say bad things about our boss. I'm going to explain the why. And we're going to work together to see if we can come up with some mitigating factors.
That's really good. And here's the nuance here. You as the manager that went to advocate for your employees to your boss, this is not a matter of if you agree with the answer from your management or not. Like, hopefully it's open enough where you can talk with your management and say, I don't agree with this. Hey, they still make the decision. Nope, can't give you time off. Coming back to that person, it's not a matter of if you agree or don't agree with them. At that point, it's kind of just communicating the facts. We're not able to do that. You don't actually have to take a side. You don't actually have to say, and I don't really agree with them, but this is what's going. And you also don't have to say, And I totally agree with them.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good principle right there. That's one of the ways we're going to stay more neutral, but also stay supportive of both the employee and the organization.
It's a tightrope. So advocating for your employee. One other nuance I just picked up on there in that role play was just the fact that you were saying, hey, you know what? We're not able to do this. We're not able to give you that time off. But you were still able to say, here are some other things we can do. You as a manager, when you're advocating for your employees, part of what you're doing is quote unquote negotiating. I know that can be a dirty word. It means when you're talking to your boss to advocate for your employee and they say, we can't do that, to say, okay, well, hey, work with me here.
Right.
You know,
What
can we do? How can we make the situation better? Right. And so just know that actually some basic interpersonal communication, negotiating skills. So just know that there is a negotiation component to you as a manager when you advocate for your employees.
That's really true. And the last thing I thought of here was, you know what? You're going to have to disappoint your employees sometime, right? There's going to be times where you're just not going to be able to give people what they want. And I know that seems pretty obvious, but that can be a real stress point for managers.
They're willing to give you a break when you're not able to
Absolutely
help them out. And that also means give yourself a little bit credit when you're advocating for your employees, meaning make sure your employees know that you're advocating for them, right? You may be the biggest advocate, but you're also decide to be the most humblest person and never tell your employees. Well, hey, they got to know you're advocating for them or they won't feel like they're getting cared and respect, even though you're doing that.
Yeah. I actually had an employee tell me, this was years ago when I was consulting at a hospital. She made the statement to me, our boss really doesn't have our back, she said. She doesn't advocate for us. And it was really interesting because I knew that this person had been going upstairs over and over again, trying to get her employees what they needed. So good point, Ethan.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we are out of time for this episode. I know it's crazy. We got through the first two. On the next episode, we're going to go through more of the top 15 management skills. We'll be able to get through quite a bit more. Please join us. We're looking forward to next time. Any closing words for this episode?
Thanks for being here with us. And sorry, I wish I had something.
And may the Lord be with you.